Hello, and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg, here today to do a bit of a Monday reading check-in, but also to talk about a book in particular, something that I finished over the weekend. First things first, over the weekend I was in one of my local bookstores because I was doing a little bit of Christmas shopping, and I saw this, which I thought was absolutely adorable. It's the Gay BC's Words and Pictures by M.L. Webb. It's just a really adorable book. Basically, it's just exactly what it promises to be. ABCs with a gay theme, like A is for ally, a friend who is there to stand up for you with strength, love, and care. B is for bi, you can shout it out loud. I like boys and girls, and that makes me proud. It's just a really cute book. I'm very happy that I grabbed a copy of it, and yeah, just wanted to show it to you because I think it's adorable. So there's that. Now, I did not get a whole lot of physical reading done over the weekend because I am still working on my buddy read with Britta Bowler. This is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I did not get a lot of reading done because I've been feeling under the weather. Today I am finally starting to feel like a human being again, so I need to dive back into that and get some more work done. I did make a lot of progress on audiobooks though, because I was able to pay, following words on a page was a little difficult for me, but following along with an audiobook was easier. So I got a lot done on that. So I finished The Shining by Stephen King, which is the book that I will be talking about, and I have made it more than halfway through Malcolm Gladwell's new book, Talking to Strangers. And I'm going to finish that, and then I'll probably do an individual review on that one as well. So that kind of catches you up on everything that's been going on in my reading life. I will talk about The Shining more in a moment. I am starting to work on plans for videos for the end of the year and figuring out my favorite books of the year. I think it's probably safe to say that at this point, my favorites and least favorites are going to be set in stone, but I want to finish some things like Little Women to see if they can crack in there. And in addition to that, I'm going to really start working on getting my final results for my goals for the year ready to go. Spoiler alert, it will involve some colors, and I'm excited about that. So I'm going to get all of that going. I am going to I wasn't going to go all the way in, but I'm going to steal a page from Doris at Aldi Books playbook. I'm not going to do a full bullet journal because I don't think I have the time, the patience, or the energy to keep something like that up, but I do think I like the idea of presenting my goal wrap-up in that sort of a format. So I'm going to be working on that as well. What else is going on? Oh, and my BookTube anniversary, my very first one, is coming up at the end of December, so I have at least one video planned as a sort of way to honor that in I think a fairly unique way. So hopefully, that's just a little bit of a tease, but hopefully you'll enjoy it when that comes around. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about. I'd love to hear what you have been reading. I have fallen so far behind on BookTube. I go through phases where there will be like a couple of days where I fall behind on videos, and then I binge and catch up during the day when I have a moment from work. And then, but now with Vlogmas, I fell behind and I feel so overwhelmed. So I really need to dive in and do some binging and catching up on videos, because since I got overwhelmed, I haven't really kept up on it at all. And I really need to do better about that. I need to just get over myself and the strain on the volume of videos and dive in and do it. So anyway, that pretty much covers the Monday reading check-in portion of the video. So let's talk about Stephen King's The Shining. I read this book a long time ago. I think I was maybe in 6th grade, possibly 7th grade when I read this for the first time. I may have reread it again at some point in my late teens, but I haven't read it in at least 20 years. So this was my first revisit to it. And I listened to it on audio, which was a different way of approaching it. I have very specific memories of this book scaring the pants off of me, which is probably because I read it when I was in 6th or 7th grade for the first time. In particular, there was one part that I thought was really scary, where it wasn't a part that you would probably expect given the pop culture status of the book, but mostly the movie, which is very different. And I may do a video of comparing them. I might not. The problem is they're so different that it's almost overwhelming. So I might do it, I might not. But anyway, there's a part that you wouldn't really expect, because it's also not in the movie, but it's Danny goes to the playground because he's been avoiding the playground at the hotel, but his parents are kind of, almost not suspicious, but they think it's a little weird that he hasn't spent time there, so he he goes out to the playground and he goes into this little tunnel thing, and then there's a ghost in there, basically, and he has to try to escape from it. I remember that being terrifying. And the funny thing that happens when you revisit something that you really liked when you were young is, especially when something like that is built up, like, oh, this is going to be really scary. It didn't scare me this time around at all. Possibly because I was prepared for it too, possibly because I'm not in 6th grade anymore. I don't know. One thing I do want to say before I really get into this is that, wow, a lot of people hate on Stephen King here on BookTube, on Instagram, and on Twitter. And, you know, I don't think I would never call him my favorite writer. I wouldn't. But guys, calm the hell down about Stephen King. It's okay. You don't have to like him. But the amount of hate people come up with at the mention of his name is a little bit staggering. You know, I know he's a popular author. He's been a popular author for a really long time. But there's a reason for that. You know, he came up with some really great stories, even if you don't like his writing. God, Carrie, The Shining, which we're talking about now, you know, he has done so much for pop culture. And yes, the movies tend to be a little bit different from the books, and there are reasons for that. The books sometimes have weird sense of humor. I think it's interesting to trace Stephen King's career in terms of his addictions. I think you can tell when you read a book that hits at a point when he is just kind of bonkers on cocaine or something like that. I think it comes out in the book. And yeah, that's probably a knock on the quality. But it can also lead to some really good things. Like Misery was inspired in part by his struggle to get sober. When you read the book or and you see all of the parts where I'm blanking on his name. Is it Paul, who's the writer? He becomes dependent on painkillers while he is under Annie Wilkes' care. And his struggles with the pain when it comes back and wanting the pain medication, and then when he tries to wean himself off of it, that is all directly inspired by Stephen King's struggle to get sober. And even The Shining comes from his fear of being a bad parent, or, you know, and the idea of repeating the sins of the past that your parents may have committed to you. And I think all of that is really interesting. Even if you read, and now it's been about 10 or maybe even 15 years since I read Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, but I think that's a really great piece of writing. So, you know, no matter who you are, I think Stephen King has a book that will appeal to you. He has like more sci-fi fantasy books. He has more strictly horror books. He has dramatic books like Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. I have not read 11/22/63, but I've heard that it's a really great book. So, you know, I mean, guys, you don't have to like him. You don't have to like everything he does. But whoa, there are a lot of people who don't even want to give him credit. And I'm sorry, he deserves credit. I did a video a while back about books and authors that could, or not books, authors who could potentially become part of the literary canon. And some of the most negative comments I've gotten on this channel have been about how I mentioned that he is probably someone who's already part of the literary canon. It's like, it's okay. You don't have to like all of the people who are part of the literary canon. I don't, but, you know, maybe give them some credit. That's all I'm going to say in that tangent. Hey guys, Editing Greg is here because I neglected to include something in this. Now, I don't want to undermine how I kind of defended Stephen King and his place in the literary canon and his abilities as a writer, but I do think it's important to note that, like all writers, he has moments where he messes up. I posted on Twitter over the weekend that there's a line in The Shining where someone is driving, and the comment is that they grab the accelerator like a lover's breast. And as I said on Twitter, I am not the world's foremost expert on this subject matter, but I definitely feel like that's not how it works at all. So, you know, there are elements of his writing that are a little bit problematic, a little bit dumb, but I would say that's also most writers. And we can make fun of them, but still respect them and what they have achieved. So there you go, that's all. Anyway, if you are not familiar with the story of The Shining, who are you? Where are you? I don't know what to say to you, but this is, of course, the famous story of the Torrance family, Father Jack, Mother Wendy, and son Danny. They agree to be the caretakers of a hotel called the Overlook in Colorado. Basically, every winter, the Overlook is up in a mountain pass that is completely impassable during the winter, so the hotel has to close for the season and reopens in the spring. Due to the expensive costs of winter damage, they have decided to hire caretakers who will stay at the hotel completely isolated from the rest of society for the winter season and take care of the place. Jack Torrance has been a professor and he is a writer. He has had moderate success. He had a story published in Esquire, which is mentioned several times as like his current crowning achievement. He has been working on a play but hasn't been getting anywhere because while he was working as a professor in Vermont, he was also crippled by alcoholism. And alcoholism, which brought out his tendencies toward rage, and he ended up in a very bad place. He broke Danny's arm, he eventually got sober, and then he was fired from his job, and now the family is left figuring out what they're supposed to do next. So that is why he gets hooked up by a former drinking buddy with this job as a caretaker at the Overlook Hotel, and while there, he is supposed to kind of settle himself, finish his play, and come out reinvigorated and ready to go. And the hope is that in the book at least, the hope is that when he gets out, maybe this friend who hooked him up with the job will have convinced the people back at the college to rehire him. So that is the basic premise of the book. The complicating factor is that this hotel has ghosts. Many people have died there. The hotel has this shady history. It was owned by gangsters for a time, so a lot of bad things have happened. And of course, the premise is that bad things happen in every hotel, so every hotel probably has ghosts. This one just has maybe a little bit more than your average hotel. So into that comes Jack, Wendy, and Danny. And Danny has a little bit of sort of an extra sensory skill. It is referred to as The Shining, famously by Dan Halloran, who has been working as the cook at the Overlook Hotel for 2 or 3 seasons at this point. And he has reached a point where he knows that this is probably going to be his last season. He will not be coming back in the spring. But on his way out, he meets Danny, recognizes that he has this power that Halloran himself has, and advises him to be careful and stay out of like room 217. In the movie, it's a different hotel number, and gives him some tactics like just pretend everything's not there. The problem is Danny has a very powerful shine, the most powerful shine that Halloran has ever seen. And the hotel becomes greedy and hungry for Danny. It wants to somehow bring his power into the hotel, whatever the hotel is doing. Hello, Editing Me and Guinness would like to add something else, which is that the book doesn't really explain why the hotel is not so interested in Halloran. He definitely has unique, scary experiences, but they're very fragmented. They're not so over the top. At no point does he really feel in danger. The only explanation for this is really that Danny is much more powerful than Halloran is at The Shining, so the hotel wants Danny. So I guess we're supposed to assume that Halloran isn't powerful enough. However, Halloran is pretty powerful, certainly more powerful than if Halloran's skill with The Shining was on par with, say, the maid who sees a ghost in a hotel room and ends up getting fired for telling people that she saw a ghost, I could believe it. The thing is, Halloran is not weak with The Shining, so why would the hotel not want him? You know, somehow he's able to work and live at the hotel for about 3 years without having any trouble other than just seeing ghosts and hiding from them really quickly. And I don't think the book does a very good job explaining that away. That's all. So as they settle into life in the hotel and become isolated from the rest of society, the hotel sort of realizes that Danny is not going to go along with what they say. Wendy is too protective of Danny, so it starts playing off of Jack and his struggles with alcoholism and his own vanity, and uses him to get to Danny. So there's a supernatural element of it, but it also is really playing off of in very clever ways. And this is where I think, even if you don't like Stephen King, because there are aspects of this book that I don't like that are really problematic, even if you don't like Stephen King, he gets at some really good things. And one thing that I have seen people in my life struggle with as they try to get sober is the idea of staying sober. It's this idea that staying sober is really hard because when you use alcohol or drugs or whatever as a crutch, you need to find something else to replace the crutch. You're always going to have bad days. You're always going to have stress. There are always going to be things that bother you. And Jack's struggle with how to react to the world in healthy ways feels very real and is very well portrayed. And considering that Stephen King himself struggled with alcoholism or addictions for a while after this book was published, it feels like he really knows what he's talking about. And another thing that's really well done is it gets at the idea of forgiveness, because Danny broke Jack's arm. Jack broke Danny's arm. And Danny has forgiven Jack. He loves his father very much. He worries about his father, but he forgives him. It's harder for Wendy because she is protected. She loves her husband, but she's protective of her son, and she's an adult. She has much more critical understanding of everything that Jack has gone through and the dangers that addiction can present. So another thing the book really plays at is this idea of, yes, Jack broke Danny's arm. Yes, Jack has gotten sober. Can he ever really be forgiven? They've moved on, but can he ever really be forgiven for what he did to Danny? And I think it plays with that in some really interesting ways, because when you have been betrayed, even if you stay with someone and you try to get past it and move on, there's still lingering doubt and suspicion. And if they do something that kind of plays back into their old habits, you do go right back to that place where you are a little scared of them. And it deals with that in very clever ways. What is not handled so cleverly is that I feel like this book could have used an editor with a more heavy hand. There are parts where I feel like there's a lot of backstory for you get the backstory of every one of the three main characters and of Halloran himself, who kind of comes in as a bigger character later on. You get very extensive backstories on all of them, and you really get into Danny's mind a lot. So there's a lot of time spent on it, and I think it all pays off. These characters become very real to you, but there's so much that I think parts of it could have been streamlined. What really feels too much, though, is the amount that Stephen King goes into the hotel. I don't feel like it's necessary. And maybe this is because in the years since I last read the book, I've seen the movie several times. And the movie really streamlines a lot of this. Basically, when you watch the movie, it says, okay, this is a hotel. Bad things happen in hotels. People die in hotels. Hotels have ghosts. And that's enough. They basically make one slight reference to things like that and let the viewer understand and go with that. Stephen King is sort of repeatedly giving you examples of bad things that happen. And he at one point, he really extensively goes through the history, all the people that the hotel has been owned by and what they did and why they couldn't make it work. And in that part, I was listening to the audiobook. Honestly, I was hitting the button to skip 15 seconds ahead, because I think what makes it so bad is that Jack is down in the boiler room, and in the boiler room there are a lot of old paperwork for the hotel, and he finds this scrapbook. Well, as he's going through the scrapbook, there are articles about each stage in the hotel's history. If he was just reacting to these articles, I think it would be fine. The problem is Stephen King has him read the article, so you get excerpts of the article, and then he reacts, and then you get an excerpt of another article, and then he reacts, and then an excerpt of another article, and he reacts, and then an excerpt of another article, and he reacts, and it gets to be a lot. And the truth is, you don't need to know a lot of that information. I think, and I get why some of it comes up. There's a lot of explaining. When they take a tour of the hotel in the beginning, Danny sees brain matter and blood splattered against the wall in one of the rooms. And in the articles, you find out that the hotel was at one point owned by gangsters, and that stage of the hotel's existence ended because there was a gangland murder in the hotel in that very room. So he's explaining something that you saw earlier. But again, I don't think you really need the explanation so much as you just need to know that Danny saw something bad. You can gloss over so much of the explanation and just fill in the blanks. And I think he does way too much explaining. Some of the things that people react to about Stephen King with this is that he has a bit of a weird sense of humor. And that's true. That's always going to be true. And I think people do weird things. We make weird jokes to ourselves, and I think he can go a little bit overboard with it. But I think it's something that we do that we don't necessarily admit to other people. and don't necessarily expect to see portrayed in a book. Like Jack and Wendy have a lot of like weird jokey moments between them that make them laugh, and to an outsider they seem weird, but when you're really just reading it, it feels like a couple moment. My husband and I have weird jokey moments with each other that other people out on the outside would probably think, oh, they're really weird. Like if you put that in a novel, people would think it's bizarre. But it's the way we live. We make weird random jokes to each other, do weird random voices. I do this with the rest of my family too, and I've seen my family do it with other people. And I've seen friends that make weird voices and jokes with their own spouses. So, it's something that we do. We just don't really see it portrayed very often. And I think that it comes across as weird, but it also comes across as like just jokey moments between a husband and a wife, or a father and his son. And I don't think it's necessarily bad in this book. There are books where, and again, I think it's interesting to trace Stephen King's work through his addictions, because part of how you can tell when it's like a cocaine book is that he really goes overboard on those things. And even after, I would say like Dreamcatcher, I didn't finish that book because it opens with like the thing that's causing suspense in the beginning of the book is ominous farting. And, I was not on board for that. So I just, got off that train, let it continue without me, and it's fine. So, I get the criticism, but on the other hand, I feel like it's kind of like, and I've become very interested in this conversation about likable versus unlikable characters. Do you really need a likable character for a book to work? I feel like, well, we'll get into that. I might frame that as a sort of discussion video later. But I think there are books where Stephen King really embraces being weird, and it goes a little too far. In this case, it's fine. And, if that's the deal breaker that makes you hate Stephen King, so be it. But again, you got to give the man some respect. He's done a lot for pop culture, and he continues to do a lot for pop culture. It's been a while since, I think 11/22/63 was probably his last quote unquote significant book. That one was chosen by the New York Times as one of its 10 best books of the year. So it's been a while since he had a really big pop culture hit, but he has so many from the past that you just have to give him some credit. So if you don't like Stephen King, that's fine, but calm down. Let him be. It's okay. Anyway, so did I like The Shining as much as I did the first time around? Not as much. I think I found myself, because of some of the things of excess, like all of the detail about the history of the hotel, I found myself actually longing for the movie. What I did like is that there's a little bit of, and I hadn't remembered this, there's a little bit of an extra explanation on how Jack ends up getting seduced by the hotel. And that's when this scrapbook conveniently comes in his path, he reads about it. His first instinct is, this would make a really great book. And that makes sense that he would have that instinct. He wants to be a famous writer. He wants to continue the attention that he's already gotten. He wants to fulfill the promise that, say, the Esquire short story he had published have gotten him. So he would be, and now that he's had his struggles with addiction, he really desperately wants to get back on his feet and continue as a writer. So it makes sense his first interest in the hotel is as the tool that he will use to get his next book, or first book, and that will make him a famous writer. And then the more he researches the hotel, once he begins that process, the whole hotel kind of seduces him in. One thing that always kind of bothered me about the movie is that it seems like, well, the movie makes the character of Jack pretty insane from the beginning. So it's not this whole process of him being seduced and, the struggles of being sober and staying sober. He's kind of insane in the movie. But what it feels like in the movie is that he just pretty much gets seduced right away, and then all you ever really hear from him is that, well, I've been trusted to be the caretaker of the hotel. I'm supposed to take care of this place. So he gets to that point in the book, but that's not how it starts. It starts with a much more natural seduction point, with the hotel appealing to him as a literary device that he can use. And then it gets into the fact that he needs to take care of it to preserve this legacy. And then he gets concerned with the fact, his role as caretaker. So I thought that made a lot more sense. But otherwise, I really appreciate the ways in which the movie streamlines some of these things. And I think the hedge maze is a really great creation in the movie. It wouldn't have worked as well in the book. So there are just different. Maybe I'll do a video comparing the two. But I think I appreciated the streamlining much more in the movie, but I still like the book's depiction of the struggle of alcoholism and a fractured family trying to get back, and whether or not it's possible to get back, so I don't think you can really say one is better than the other because they're so different and they're doing different things, and that's all. So that's already a lot. I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to get back to work, get back to reading. And again, I would love to hear what you've been up to, what you've been reading. I will start catching up with everybody's Vlogmas videos and all of that. So I'm really looking forward to it. Check out the Gay BCs if you would like. Let me know what you think of Stephen King. Again, if you get angry at the mention of his name, calm down and then leave me a comment. But I would love to hear from everybody about that. What do you think of Stephen King? Are you a hater? Are you a lover? Come on. So anyway, thank you for your time watching this video, especially if you've made it here to the end. I applaud you for that. And I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.